In 1994, the scientific and religious worlds were rocked by a study published in the prestigious Journal of Statistical Science. The book of Genesis, according to the study, contained hidden names and relevant dates of men who lived thousands of years after the book was written. Soon, words and phrases relating to modern events were being discovered. Could this code reveal the future? Was the assassination of an Israeli prime minister in the late 20th century predicted over 3,000 years ago? New and startling information suggests it was. Does the code demonstrate conclusively that Jesus Christ was the true Messiah and the Jehovah of the Old Testament? Has the code predicted the outcome of thousands of years of fear and hatred in the Middle East? Can the reality of this Bible code be demonstrated and proven in today's skeptical world? Since Gutenberg printed the first Bible, it has become the most pervasive book in the world. Every year, more copies of the Bible are printed than any other book ever published, by far. What is there in this book that makes it so interesting? Are we simply fascinated by the history of a small group of people in a dusty corner of the world? Or is it the content, a philosophy for living? Can it be, as some historians suggest, that it is the very foundation of all Western law and culture? The Old Testament, specifically the Torah, or the first 5 books of the Bible, is, according to its adherents, a history of the Supreme Being's interaction with mankind, specifically the children of Israel. Ever since the discovery of the Bible codes over 20 years ago, scientists, scholars, and theologians have argued over the reality and meaning of what appears to be yet another incredible aspect of this amazing book. Names, places, and events are mentioned that reach even into modern times. But how could this be? If the codes are real, does it mean we can predict our own future?
Well, the Bible code can be a very complicated code. It takes an understanding of statistics. It's not a crossword. There's got to be statistical value for it to have any value in itself. Now, it also has got to work with a proper understanding of God's word and of his plan for humanity. When these two come together, then we have a chance of having an accurate code.
In the days following the terrible tragedy that befell New York City and America on September 11, 2001, many people turned to their Bible for comfort, guidance, and direction. Could it be there is far more to be found in its pages than any of us realize? Is there a complex set of hidden codes embedded in the Old Testament text of the Bible that can give all of mankind a glimpse into the future? Has the code already revealed the outcome of thousands of years of hostility, fear, and hatred in the Middle East? And can the reality of this Bible code be demonstrated and proved in today's skeptical world? Have governments and nations learned anything from the Bible codes in the past decade that can help us face the uncertainty of a dangerous world? Was there in fact a warning of the terrorist attack on New York hidden in the ancient text that can be scientifically proven? Words and phrases relating to modern events appear to have been discovered hidden beneath the surface text of the Bible. Over the past 2 decades, the question has become, does this code reveal what is to come? After more than 20 years of study, researchers are still unsure.
Every major event in world history, every major figure in world history appears to be encoded in the Bible.
But if such things as the monumental tragedy of the World Trade Center towers in New York are there in these codes, the question becomes, can the codes then be accessed in a way that will let us prepare in advance for other impending disasters? The fact is, events have been discovered in the code, but the results of those discoveries and whether or not other events can or even should be sought is the subject of a lively debate, a debate that began about 4,000 years ago. According to the Bible, a man called Moses was told by God himself to come up on Mount Sinai where he would be given tables of stone and the law and commandments, which, quote, I have written. According to ancient Jewish tradition, God wrote more than just the Ten Commandments. He wrote the entire Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. Moses was merely the scribe. But almost from the moment Moses came down from the mountain, critics have complained that God wouldn't write such a thing, and Moses couldn't write it. Incredibly, after thousands of years of research and study, scientists, scholars, and theologians still can't agree.
There's an ancient tradition among Jews concerning the Torah. This tradition claims that unlike all other books of Scripture, the Torah alone was not merely inspired, it was dictated directly by God to Moses in a precise letter-by-letter sequence without punctuation or spaces between words.
Jews and Christians alike have long considered the words of the Bible to be divinely inspired, but this tradition suggests something more. It suggests that God literally wrote the Torah. But is there any evidence that the tradition has some basis in fact?
Well, we need to understand that in the ancient texts, there were no spaces between the words. Scholars call this form of writing scripta continua. In other words, it was just a stream of letters. You inferred where the spaces between the words occurred. Archaeologists have discovered 22-line inscription this way. This is a pretty well-established fact in archaeology. The spaces between the words as we're used to it apparently were introduced during the days of Ezra, much later, of course, than the days of Moses.
That means that while Moses was on Mount Sinai, and quite probably for some time after, he was busy writing down in precise sequence the entire 304,805 letters of the Torah. Interestingly, scholars have since found the Bible code present throughout the Old Testament. The question that jumps out at us is why? What could be the reason for requiring such a strict and difficult construction?
It is also part of the tradition that within the precise sequence of letters, there is encrypted information of a sort that only a divine hand could have placed there. However quaint and absurd that might seem, the tradition has a long and highly respected history. Nachmanides, one of the great Jewish sages, teaching in the 12th century, told his students that all of Israel's history could be found in Deuteronomy 32, commonly known as the Song of Moses. Another outstanding rabbi and teacher, who lived and died in the 13th century, Rabbi Bachya ben Asher of Saragossa, Spain, described a process whereby the skipping of equal intervals of letters in the Torah could lead to obtaining divinely ordained information. And in the 18th century, one of the greatest of the post-biblical sages, Elijah Solomon, known reverently as the Great One of Vilna, made the startling claim that all that was, is, and will be unto the end of time is included in the Torah.
And surprisingly, it is not only religious scholars who have searched the Torah for hidden messages. Some of the world's most notable scientists have searched for the coded information. Sir Isaac Newton served as provost of Cambridge University for many years and is generally considered as the first modern scientist. He was also a firm believer in a biblical code.
Isaac Newton was certain there was a hidden code in the Bible. He desperately tried to find it. He learned Hebrew and spent more than half of his life searching for the Bible code. Most of the million or more words in Newton's own handwriting had nothing to do with mathematics or astronomy, but rather esoteric theology. It was clear from the writings that Newton believed that there was a prophecy of human history hidden in the Bible.
Newton was certain the Bible, in fact the entire universe, was, quote, a cryptogram set by the Almighty. But the secret of the Bible code, if indeed it existed at all, eluded the great scientist. Have modern scientists actually found the code? Can computers succeed where men have failed? How did the greatest tragedy in Jewish history set the stage for the scientific investigation of the Bible code? By the time of the Second World War, cryptanalysis, the art of making and breaking codes, was well on its way to becoming a science. A small group of Polish mathematicians had broken the supposedly unbreakable German Enigma code in 1934. When America entered the war, the fledgling U.S. Signal Corps, later the National Security Agency, was able to keep one step ahead of the code, giving Allied generals and admirals advanced knowledge of German strategy. But in order to keep up with the constantly mutating code, they had been forced to devise some means of making huge numbers of calculations. What they came up with was a huge mechanical calculator they called a computation machine. These computation machines made cryptanalysis a viable science. Meanwhile, Rabbi Michael Bar Weissmandl, a childhood Talmudic and mathematical prodigy in Czechoslovakia prior to World War II, survived the Holocaust, and after the war immigrated to the United States. Weissmandl, while still a young man, had stumbled onto the notes of the 13th century rabbi Bachya, suggesting that divine information could be derived from the Torah by means of skipping a specific interval of letters. Now, with all the horror of the Holocaust behind him, Weissmandl returned to the fascination of his youth, the possibility of a mysterious Bible code.
Rabbi Weissmandl, through his diligence and determination in his studies of the Torah, made some remarkable discoveries. In the book of Genesis, if you go to the first equivalent of a T and count 49 letters, and then take the next one, in other words, the 50th letter, is the equivalent of what we would consider a vav. It's what we would consider an O. You count another 50 letters, it's a resh, or like our R. You count another 50 letters, and you come to a hey, or like an H. In other words, it's as if you found a T-O-R-H at 49 letter intervals. It spells the word Torah. Rather remarkable in its own right, but one of those things you could dismiss as just a happenstance. But when you get to Exodus, you discover the same thing happens. You come to a T, 49 letters plus 1, you get to the O, the R, and the H the same way. And so again, this starts to look very designed. In fact, it's rather interesting that this number 50 are the number of days from the Exodus to the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. In pursuing this further, you go to the book of Leviticus, the third book, and nothing like this happens. But you go to the fourth book of the Torah, the book of Numbers, the same thing happens, but only if you spell Torah backwards. Kind of weird. You go to the book of Deuteronomy, again you find the equivalent thing, but only if you spell it backwards. Now, you wonder, what does this mean? And you stand back from it all. It's as if those four books are pointing to the middle book, two forward, two back, to the book of Leviticus. So you examine Leviticus more carefully, and you discover not 49 letter intervals, but 7 letter intervals. You have the word Yahweh, or the name of God. And you stand back from this whole thing, and you realize the Torah is always pointing to the name of God. Rabbi Weissmandl's discovery is the first modern hint of hidden codes in the Bible.
It was the 50-year-old discovery of Rabbi Weissmandl that finally convinced a small group of Israeli scientists that computers might be the key that could unlock the centuries-old mystery of the Bible code. Dr. Eliyahu Rips devised a mathematical model to test the viability of the skip codes that Weissmandl had demonstrated with his work. He enlisted the help of Dr. Doron Whitsom, a graduate student in physics specializing in general relativity, and Yoav Rosenberg, a brilliant young computer scientist. Together, they hoped to prove scientifically whether or not a Bible code existed. It would be a long and tedious undertaking. Let's take a moment here and explain exactly what an equidistant letter sequence, or ELS code, is, and how it is constructed, with this simple example. Rips explained that each code is a case of adding every 4th or 12th or 50th letter to form a word. Skip X spaces and another X spaces, and the hidden message is spelled out. This appears to be nothing more than a simple description of ELS coding. But if you begin with the first letter of the paragraph, R, then skip every 3 letters and pick up the 4th letter following, the coded message is revealed. What is infinitely more difficult than deciphering the code is the creation of a surface text that is sensible and easily understood, and yet will seamlessly accommodate specific letters at fixed intervals. In order to test the ELS code theory, the research team created a program according to strict scientific and statistical rules. The usable text would be only the book of Genesis, some 78,000 plus letters. In order to make certain the results could not be tainted by subjective interpretation, they selected the names of 32 of Israel's most famous sages as the target of their search. To make it more difficult, they also asked the program to search for either the target's birth date or death date. After months of work, the complex mathematical model and program was ready. Now it was up to the computer. The results of this test startled even the researchers. All 32 names were there, coded into the text, along with either their date of birth or their date of death. But that wasn't enough for Rips. He wanted further proof. In his final experiment, he took the 32 names and 64 dates the codes had revealed and jumbled them in 10 million different combinations, so that 9,999,999 were a mismatch, and only one was a correct pairing. Then they ran the test again. Only the one correct name and date came together. The odds against this happening by chance, the researchers tell us, are literally 1 in 10 million. The study was sent to the prestigious American mathematics journal Statistical Science for peer review and possible publication. Indeed, nothing is published in statistical science until it has been thoroughly reviewed by at least one independent referee, and on occasion 2. In this instance, the documentation was submitted to 3 separate referees. Robert Koss, the editor of the Statistical Science Journal and a professor at Carnegie Mellon University, is quoted in the article. Our referees were baffled. Their prior beliefs made them think the book of Genesis could not possibly contain meaningful references to modern-day individuals. Yet when the authors carried out additional checks, the effect persisted. The paper is thus offered to statistical science readers as a challenging puzzle. Enter Harold Gans, senior cryptologist for the National Security Agency in Maryland. Determined to prove the results were a fluke, he wrote his own program and added the names of 34 more prominent Jewish sages and the cities of their birth or death. What he discovered that fateful day at his office in Maryland was that all 66 names were there, firmly fixed in the code.
So here's a puzzle to end all puzzles. This has enormous implications to both the scientific and, of course, the religious worlds. Is it possible that we now have an intersection, a common ground between the scientific and the religious worlds?
Publication of the study set off a storm of controversy. Professors, mathematicians, cryptographers, and computer scientists rushed forward to condemn or support the findings. Dr. Robert Ammann, a highly respected member of both the Israeli and U.S. National Academy of Scientists, states flatly, the Bible code is simply a fact. While an equally well-known scientist and one of the code's toughest critics, Dr. Maya Bar-Hillel, speaking to a gathering of academics and scientists at Hebrew University, prefaced her remarks by saying, regardless of the evidence, the code's phenomenon obviously cannot be valid, because that would mean that God wrote the Torah. Dr. Bar-Hillel's comment does go right to the heart of the controversy. Jewish tradition has held for over 3,000 years that God did indeed write the Torah. The question is, have Dr. Rips and his colleagues proven it scientifically? Critics claim words and phrases can be found in any text of sufficient length, and that the rules of statistics and probability were ignored in the original study. Yet to date, none of the critics, not a single one, has constructed their own study and submitted it to scientific peer review.
Although scientists are still squabbling over the codes, many Jews and many Christians have embraced the Bible codes. The Bible itself alerts us. In Proverbs 25:2, it says, it is the glory of God to conceal a matter, but it's the honor of kings to search them out. People never cease to be fascinated by secret codes or secret writing. The encryption or decryption of codes have tumbled proud thrones and determined the course of wars.
We can demonstrate, using the laws of quantum mechanics, specifically the uncertainty principle and chaos theory, that it is absolutely impossible within the laws of physics and mathematics as we know it today to know the future in detail as is demonstrated in these codes. Consequently, we come to the scientific conclusion that the author of these codes is not bound by the laws of physics and mathematics as we understand it.
It would seem, then, that if science has proved that the Bible code is beyond chance, and if the scope of the encryption is beyond the scope of human ability, it should be safe to assume that future events that are encoded in the Bible can be scientifically accessed and acted upon. Or is it?
When going into the future, we have to guess at the words because the event hasn't happened yet. We don't know what it is. As soon as you start guessing the words, as soon as you start guessing the context and trying to determine what would be the event that would use these words, you're out of the realm of science. You're guessing. It's subjective. It's not scientific anymore.
If that's the case, the Bible code phenomenon presents researchers, scientists, theologians, Christians, and Jews with the unnerving paradox that while the Bible code clearly foretells events far into the future, that future is still closed to us, even though the book is in our hands. Perhaps the best way to approach the problem is to look at some of the things that have been predicted by the Bible code in advance of their actually happening. In 1990, the city of Tel Aviv in Israel was a city gripped by fear. The Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein had threatened to send Scud missiles into Israel in retaliation for coalition attacks on Iraqi forces in Kuwait. The question was not if, but when he would launch the missiles. If the government of Israel could only know when the attack would come, they could better prepare their citizens. As it was, all they could do was tell the people to be ready for anything, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Terror of the unknown engulfed the city of Tel Aviv. Meanwhile, in Jerusalem, the three Israeli scientists, Eliyahu Rips, Doron Whitsom, and Yoav Rosenberg, were poring over data from their amazing new discovery. They told the government they might be able to pinpoint the exact date of the missile attack using computers and the Bible. Israeli officials were skeptical, but the conditions in Tel Aviv and other border communities were unbearable. The Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency, provided the scientists with the 3 dates they thought the attack would most likely occur, and the scientists went to work. They believed they had discovered a mathematically precise system of encoded messages which had to do with the Gulf War. Now they would have to demonstrate the validity of their discovery under the most crucial circumstances. They were looking for something thought to be impossible, something specific, a date and an event still somewhere in the future. Could it be that somehow the precise date of what could be Israel's darkest hour was foreshadowed nearly 4,000 years ago in the pages of the Bible? The computer found all 3 of the dates the Mossad had given the scientists, but the most prominent was the 3rd Shavat. And on January 18, 1991, the 3rd Shavat on the Jewish calendar, the first Scud missiles were launched from Iraq upon the citizens of Tel Aviv. Today, the Israeli government refuses to confirm that a team of research scientists pinpointed the exact date by means of the Bible code. But they don't deny it either. In another instance, made famous in a book by a writer and former journalist, Michael Drosnin, the Bible code anticipated the assassination of then Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. Drosnin had become aware of the code research being done by Rips and his colleagues and had followed it carefully for years. Then one day he discovered in the code the name of Yitzhak Rabin. That in itself wasn't too surprising, but he also found running across the page and bisecting Rabin's name the words, "assassin that will assassinate." The assassinations of Anwar Sadat and Robert Kennedy had already been found encoded in the Bible, and the research was so unerringly accurate he felt he must try to warn Rabin. Drosnin made arrangements to meet a close friend of the Prime Minister's to see if he would deliver a letter to him. The friend was incredulous. Nevertheless, he agreed to take the letter to Rabin, but he warned Drosnin that the Prime Minister would pay no attention to anything called Bible codes. He was
and right across his name, elected, and his nickname. I was worried because everyone knew he was going to lose that election. There was no question that Perez was going to win. Every poll showed it. And I called up Dr. Rips in Israel, and I said, Ellie, look what I found. What can this mean? The code is surely wrong. And this was about a week before the election, and Dr. Ripp's a very patient man. He said, wait, let's see. And then, of course, a week later, Netanyahu was elected in a vote that was so close that it took them 2 days to count the ballots and know who had won. But the Bible had predicted the election 3,000 years ago.
Modern researchers working on their own and independent of the original Bible Code research team appear to have also proved the accuracy of the Bible Code. The results of the Clinton impeachment vote and subsequent hearings were also forecast in the Bible Code. And when the 2000 presidential race came down to the state of Florida, Bible Code researchers discovered a matrix that correctly revealed Bush the winner. Have the Bible codes opened a window on the future? A Jewish rabbi reverently known as the Great One of Vilna made the astonishing claim in the 18th century that everything that ever was or ever will be is included in the Torah. Could that be true?
Among the questions that get asked is, since these codes seem to evidence events that occurred far after the Torah was written, is it possible to use the codes to foretell the future? And the answer to that is a resounding no. The Bible expressly prohibits any form of divination.
Fully 1/3 of the Bible is about prophecies of the future. These prophecies are about the end time, a coming Antichrist, and about the mark of the beast economic system known as 666. The Bible does prohibit seeking the future through fortune tellers, witches, even astrologers. But to put the Bible Code in the same class as fortune tellers is an insult to God.
What have the code researchers actually found in the pages of the Torah? What about the remaining books of the Old Testament? Have the codes been discovered in the other inspired books of the Bible? Could it be that your own past, present, and future are encoded in the Bible? This book became the best-selling nonfiction book of 1997, which made the assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin the most well-known event predicted by the Bible Code. Yet this tragic and apparently preventable incident is not the only thing the sustained and growing interest in the Bible Code rests upon. A number of significant discoveries have been made within the 304,805 letters of the Torah.
Dorham Whitsom discovered a series of words that relate to the modern plague of acquired immune deficiency syndrome, known as AIDS. In Genesis 19, verses 15 through 17, the word AIDS is found encoded. In the 5th chapter of Genesis, there are a remarkable number of encoded words that relate to the AIDS virus: in the blood, death, virus, immunity. Even the Hebrew abbreviation for HIV is found encoded there.
The coming together of two of history's most ancient enemies in a process to try and establish peace between the sons of Isaac and the sons of Ishmael is also recorded in the Torah.
The Middle East peace process has captured the attention of the world the past few years. In chapters 8 and 9 of the book of Deuteronomy, the Bible Code reveals a list of the principles involved in this process, as well as a description of what is going on. We find the words peace and treaty along with Israel, Arafat, PLO, Yitzhak Rabin, and Shimon Peres.
One wonders if perhaps the Great One of Vilna was not correct when he suggested that all our futures are to be found in the Code. The research has been going on for barely a decade, yet the amount and variety of information already found encoded in the Bible is truly amazing. How much more is there yet to discover?
Over 2,000 years ago, King Herod the Great had a building constructed around a cave in Hebron that contained the tombs of Abraham, Sarah, and other ancestors, today honored by Muslims, Christians, and Jews alike. It is called the Cave of the Patriarchs. Here on this sacred spot in March 1994, an American doctor, Baruch Goldstein, a descendant of the survivors of the 1929 Arab massacre of Jews living in Hebron, shot and killed 39 Muslim worshippers in a mad act of revenge. So far, the Cave of the Patriarchs, Baruch, Goldstein, revenge, and even the year 5689 in the Hebrew calendar 1929, and El Fatah, the name of the PLO, have all been discovered in the Bible Code in this passage.
One of the most interesting of all the discoveries made by Weismandel, in addition to the Torah sequence that we looked at earlier, is the discovery of the name of one of the most beloved Jewish rabbis, Rabbi Moses ben Maimonides, who is known as Rambam. Rabbi Weismandel found the name encoded at a 4-letter interval in Exodus 11, verse 9. What's even more remarkable is that in the same passage is encoded the principal work of Rambam, the Mishnah Torah, which is the work that codifies the 613 commandments that obligate the Jews even to this day. From the first letter of the first word, Mishnah, to Torah, is 613 letters, and they're encrypted with an interval of 50 letters. What makes this so remarkable is that from the giving of the first commandment in Egypt unto the 613th commandment at Mount Sinai was exactly 50 days. Now, it's been estimated that the probability of those words being 613 apart, encoded on an interval of 50, is less than 1 in 186 million.
Yaakov Ramsel, a Messianic pastor with a rich background in Hebrew, has spent many years researching the Bible code without the aid of a computer. His research further demonstrates the skill of the cryptographer.
The first chapter of Genesis is the most magnificent structure. It's a basis and a foundation of all the Word of God. What God has placed in there are over 1,000 biblical names of people that are recorded in the surface reading throughout the whole Bible, Old and New Testament. There is Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and all their wives. In Genesis 1:21, where God talks about the great seas, in there is encoded Noah, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. He also placed the name of Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, the Pharaoh, and even the 2 midwives in Exodus 1. God has encoded within that one chapter many, many thousands of insights for us to find. They're not secrets, they're just hidden.
Since publication of the original code research, literally hundreds of references to people and events have been discovered. People and events that could not have been known at the time of Moses. But what about the rest of the scriptural writings? What of the Old Testament and the New Testament? Is there evidence that the code phenomenon exists in all of the inspired scriptural writings? We put these questions to Roy Reinhold, a retired U.S. Navy officer, a Hebrew code researcher, and a Bible code software reviewer. He is familiar with a variety of encryption methods and has developed a unique and compelling approach to code research.
In addition to finding the Bible code in the Torah, researchers have found code matrices throughout the entire Old Testament. My working model is to look for visually clustered terms that are close together and form a tightly constructed matrix. The matrix must also have a coherent and meaningful message. This matrix in the Torah, for example, yields an enormous amount of information about 57 specifically accurate items surrounding Thomas Edison's life. The name of his wives, places lived, and his inventions are all clustered together within this matrix.
If it seems astonishing that so much could be encoded in such a limited amount of text, consider this. In the 12th century, Nachmanides, another of the great Jewish sages, made the startling claim that all of Israel's history could be found in the 32nd chapter of Deuteronomy. He was challenged by a student and asked to prove such a statement by finding the student's name. Nachmanides accepted the challenge, told the young man to look carefully at a certain passage in the 32nd chapter of Deuteronomy, and introduced him to the idea of ELS codes. The student, it is reported, did indeed find his name. The concept of the Bible code, it seems, has been around for centuries, awaiting perhaps the invention of the computer to prove it actually existed. But has it been proven?
While the critics of the Bible code continue to attack the original Bible code discoveries, numerous software developers have commercially advanced Bible code findings way beyond the pioneer discoveries of the late 1980s. The old ongoing debate is no longer relevant since the critics do not even address the new research of today. For example, 27 distinct terms relating to the bombing of the American embassy in Nairobi, Kenya, were found within 2 weeks of the incident. The central term was embassy. USA was found 3 times along with truck, bomb, 247 were killed, Nairobi, Kenya, the phrase to murder or destroy, the date including day, month, and year, the time of day, the names of the 2 men identified as the bombers. There are those who would suggest that if the search had begun 3 weeks earlier, the whole tragedy might have been avoided. Others believe that nothing we do can change God's divinely ordained plan. The question still to be answered is, can we or should we try to alter future events discovered in the Bible code?
Will the Bible code, like the sunrise, illuminate what lies before us? Or are we pursuing a setting sun, fading into the darkness? Will the future always be just out of sight? Or is the key to unlocking the secret of tomorrow now in our own hands? In the messages of the Old Testament, is there a verification of the central character of the New Testament, Jesus Christ? And perhaps most importantly, can the truth of the Bible code be proven? When Rabbi Solomon, the Great One of Vilna, suggested everything that ever was or ever will be can be found in the Torah, he wasn't speaking in generalities. He insisted it was there in minute detail, implying that your name and mine, as well as our life history, and possibly even our life destiny, was to be found there. Could such a thing be possible? In Psalm 139 we read, "All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." Could it be that the book referred to is the very Bible we hold in our hands? Dr. Rips believes we are currently dealing with only the two-dimensional aspect of the code, and that even that is much more than we could ever decipher. But he also believes the code is more like a hologram, with at least 3 and perhaps 4 dimensions, in which all the world's academic, spiritual, and scientific knowledge might be stored. According to Prophecy in the News, an Oklahoma City publication, one of the greatest scientific discoveries of all time came about as a direct result of decoding certain words in the Bible.
In 1905, a 26-year-old physicist broke the code from an ancient Hebrew word found in Genesis 1:16, Ha-Ma'or, which translates the great light or the sun. He reversed the word. And when we reversed the word, now we have rum, it means raised. He took mass and took light and put it to the second power. Now the paper that he turned in to his peers, other scientists, gave us what is commonly known as the theory of relativity, or better known as E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light to the second power. Many years later, Albert Einstein confessed the source of his great find to some rabbis in New York City. He explained to them that within this one area, Genesis 1:16, that's where he found his deduction and his formula for E equals mc squared. And he laughingly told the rabbis that it's there, find it if you can. But it's not known whether he shared this with the other scientists in this world. I don't believe he did.
Perhaps he was wise to keep it to himself. Today, the controversy over the Bible code pits scientist against scientist, theologian against theologian. And with new discoveries being made on an almost daily basis, the inevitable confrontation between Christians and Jews assumes new intensity as the name of Jesus Christ continues to emerge from the recent code research.
The structured matrix approach to code research has given us an opportunity to see in a graphic way how the words and phrases tie together. This is one of the larger matrices running from Genesis 1 to 2 Samuel. Here the central term is Elohim Yeshua, and crossing Yeshua is Messiah. Right of the central term is Messiah, and left of the central term is Messiah. Here in the lower right, relative to the central term, we find Savior, Redeemer, and Messiah. And here, crossing all these terms, is the true or genuine one, and finally, Yahweh or Jehovah. It is impossible to conclude that there is not a clear, coherent message encoded in this matrix. That message is that Jesus is the true, genuine, and real Messiah, and He is Jehovah in the Old Testament.
In Genesis 1 and verse 17, there's a phrase, God in the expanse. In Hebrew, it's Elohim Bavrekia. The Yod in Elohim, if you count forward, every 26th letter spells Yeshua, which means Jesus, the teacher. And then with the word in the expanse, Bavrekia, take the ayin and count 26 letters forward, you have Jesus, the sin offering.
In both the Exodus and in the Psalms, we find Yeshua, the great high priest. In the book of Daniel, we find Yeshua in the vision of the 70 weeks.
In Psalm 22, the Bible code spells out the crucified Messiah. And in Psalm 41, beginning with the phrase, they plot evil, counting every second letter from right to left, we find the name of the man Judas Iscariot, who was plotting against Yeshua.
I use the entire Tanakh, or Old Testament, from Genesis to 2 Chronicles for this incredible matrix. I looked for Yeshua HaMashiach, which means Jesus the Messiah, and I found two sentences as the central term. What is he? The gift, Yeshua the Messiah, is it not? Surely it is. Astoundingly, alongside these sentences is the message, announcement, I am coming soon with love to Israel.
We went to Psalm 22 because according to the Pashat, or the main reading of the text, the plain reading, it is a first-person narrative of Jesus Christ on the cross. So one of the codes that we found amongst many in that psalm, we found Yeshua, which is Hebrew for Jesus, with two vavs above and one below his name. Now in Hebrew, the vav itself means nail. We see two vavs above, or a nail, another nail, and one below, exactly as was portrayed at the cross of Christ 1,000 years later. This event is written in a historical document known as the Book of Psalms, specifically chapter 22. 1,000 years before the event, crucifixion wasn't invented till 90 BC, and the Romans didn't even exist. And here it's already spoken in the Word of God.
The original code researchers, not surprisingly, insist these findings are at best a misuse of the code techniques, and at worst out-and-out manipulations designed to put something into the Torah and the Old Testament that isn't there.
Controversy continues on all sides. Are these codes real? Are they evidence of an origin from outside time and space? Are they an authentication that this message is really from God? Or are they just an artifact, intrinsic to the Hebrew language? The Hebrew language lends itself to such things because of its shorter alphabet, its density, its inferred vowels. Or is it possible that the Hebrew language itself was designed in the first place to facilitate such codes?
Roy Reinhold and his associates, Robert S. Canary and software consultant Kevin Akers, have developed a software program to examine the original Greek manuscripts of the New Testament. They've prepared the text and are finalizing the search terms. Is it possible that the inspired writings of the Gospels also contain coded information?
Our purposes are really twofold. First, we want to discover if the code phenomenon actually exists in the Greek New Testament. Second, we want to discover what light this sheds upon the 5 major manuscripts, specifically which one is more authentic and therefore more reliable.
More work needs to be done in this area, but given the dedication of the researchers and the sophistication of today's computers, the answers may soon be forthcoming. In any case, it seems the Bible codes are no longer the exclusive province of scientists, mathematicians, and scholars. Some experts believe that's perfectly in keeping with the scriptures themselves.
It's never been God's style to put us at the mercy of experts. He chose fishermen, a tax collector, common people, to get his message across. God always expresses his essential truths in terms that anyone can understand.
Indeed, that seems to be the case. Discoveries are beginning to pour in from all over the world. Victor Pereira in Portugal developed this matrix in which the names Yahweh, Yeshua, and Messiah appear closely associated with one another. From Florida comes word that a teacher by the name of Barry Rothman believes he has discovered the longitude and latitude of the location of the lost Ark of the Covenant, clearly delineated in the Bible code. Also, many code researchers believe it is time to move past the issues of validity and take up the question of the Bible code's practical applications, which, of course, is the whole reason people are looking for future solutions within the Bible code. Can we use the Bible code to predict the outcome of elections? Can we use the code to solve archaeological mysteries? Can we apply the code to the practical day-to-day business of just doing business? And is there a way to demonstrate that all of this is possible, that the future lies just beneath the surface text of the Bible, waiting to be uncovered by modern technology? The codes obviously anticipate people and events hundreds, even thousands of years into the future. Who could have known 3,500 years ago that guided missiles would even exist, let alone target the Israeli city of Tel Aviv? Yet the information appears to be there, encoded along with other relevant details of the events of the Gulf War. Yet both the reality of the predicted events, as well as the scientific reality of unpredictability, appear to be immune to criticism. Is there any way to reconcile these two apparently conflicting concepts? No one could have anticipated the actions of Timothy McVeigh in Oklahoma City, yet this event figures prominently in the Bible Code.
The Bible Code matrix about the Oklahoma City bombing reveals much about the incident. The key word is Timothy McVeigh. Crossing McVeigh's name are the words slay man, woman and infant. The bomb was delivered in a truck, which the code refers to as a chariot of fire. Also mentioned, Ryder truck, Terry Nichols, the convicted co-conspirator, and the date, April 19, 1995. In an adjacent code it says Timothy McVeigh, hired killer, and he will die, which of course happened.
It all seems to have taken place just as the Bible Code suggests, but none of it was discovered until after the fact. But what about the tragedy of September 11, 2001? Was there a Bible Code warning? On May 7, 1999, a national television special on the Bible Code reported that a number of code researchers had begun to examine the biblical text in search of future events surrounding the year 2000 and the new millennium. What they found coincided with already established prophecies. The report stated that in New York, codes researcher Keith Jackson had been examining an Old Testament matrix that seemed to confirm the destruction the Bible predicts for the modern daughter of Babylon, if, as some scholars suggest, that city is in fact New York.
We have found 14 items within a matrix in the book of Leviticus. These 14 items, if taken together, seem to suggest some type of terrorist attack against New York a little bit beyond the year 2000. According to this encoded information, the prophecy as stated in the book of Revelation could occur within the next 10 years.
The Bible Code warning of a terrorist attack on New York City was broadcast on national TV 28 months ahead of the actual attack. But what were some of the other 14 items found in the 1999 Matrix that weren't aired in the TV special?
The New York Matrix mentions Arabs, war, many weapons, several small bombs and devices. It also mentions city burned and many perish. In addition to that, it suggests that there will be an ongoing attack.
Within 3 hours of the start of the terrorist attack, Bible Code researchers re-examined the matrix discovered by Keith Jackson and found numerous words and phrases that were relevant to what was happening at the time. September 11, 2001. In the morning. New York attack. World Trade Center. 4 planes, 2 buildings. American. United. Terrorist. USA government. Kabul. Afghanistan. Taliban. And Osama bin Laden guilty. It was days and weeks later before the US government confirmed who was behind the terrorist attack.
Since the September 11th attack, several prominent codes researchers have discovered what appears to be a great deal of detail about the attack. Could it be that the biblical prophecy of the surface text itself is the bridge between what can and cannot be foretold? Are there some things researchers not only can, but should be looking for?
Encoded in the Bible Code, within the Old Testament, we find quite a bit of information about this Antichrist, information that is also given to us in the New Testament. For example, we can find the Antichrist involvement in Middle East politics. We can find the length of his reign. We can find the 10, let's say, political entities with which he will reign. And we can also find its foreshadows in former global governments such as Persia, Babylon, Egypt, Rome, Greece. So those are quite amazing findings that we are given to look upon through the Bible code in the Old Testament.
Is it possible that the discovery of the Bible code itself is part and parcel of the end-time warnings? Following the events of 9/11, many Bible code researchers began examining the Torah in greater depth, seeking to not only confirm the validity of the Bible code itself, but to see if there were in fact clues to what might happen next.
The name Osama bin Laden is found once in the whole Bible. It is the key code for the 9/11 attack. Nearby that name, we can also find the names of heads of states and countries such as Libya, Iraq, Lebanon, and the names Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein. Now, could this mean that these people were involved in the attack? We don't know, but maybe it's worth investigating.
The World Trade Center matrix is far more advanced than other code matrices. It now has 30 terms that are complete sentences, which is something entirely new in codes research. The statistical odds of this information occurring is only 1 chance in 10 to the 340th power, the number 1 followed by 340 zeros. What's more, these sentences can actually point us in entirely new directions. For example, in the book of Numbers we find, "She utters words, Bin Laden is in me, and behold, he committed crimes," where she probably refers to the USA. Also in the book of Numbers, this sentence appears, "He will do again in year 5762, where you will cry out, the male." In the Jewish calendar, the year 5762 began on September 18th, 2001. The significance became all too clear when anthrax letters began appearing through the mail.
Other code researchers are also finding longer, more complex information in the Bible code as the result of the World Trade Center attack.
The 9/11 terrorist attack cluster continues to grow as a very tight cluster of codes beneath Ezekiel 7. The focal code of this cluster is an unusually lengthy ELS of 28 letters, with a very short skip of only 15 letters. It reads, "New York, they accompany the unfortunate who are stricken in it. The worshipers are gathering around God." This certainly seems to be what's happened since the attack. But its length, location in the text, and brevity of skip make it one of the most significant Bible codes ever discovered.
According to Bible Code Digest, Saddam Hussein was also deeply involved in the terrorist attacks on September 11th. All of this is intriguing, of course, but critics still insist that codes similar to those found in the Bible can be found in any book.
It's true that many single words or short codes might be found in any book, particularly if extremely long skips are allowed. However, the odds of finding a code as long as this about Saddam Hussein are less than 1 in a billion. And in fact, if we consider the entire terrorist attack cluster in Ezekiel, it is impossible that such an extensive cluster could be due to random chance.
For me, ultimately, the best use of the Bible code is the evidence not only that there is a God, but that He has a plan, and the Word of God is His inspired revelation. He knows the end from the beginning, and everything is working out according to a preset plan.
That plan, according to some of the most recent code discoveries, covers a broad range of people and events. Great hurricanes such as George and Mitch were encoded. Regarding Hurricane George, the Bible code named among 21 details the country's hit and the number of homeless and dead from the disaster. On the Mitch hurricane, the code accurately named the day, month, and year, as well as calling it a Category 5 hurricane. Also mentioned was John Glenn's return to space. Even such trivial matters as the home run race between Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa. Amazingly, in this baseball matrix of 44 home run details, the code named not only McGwire and Sosa, but also listed all the great home run hitters: Babe Ruth, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Roger Maris, and listed the number of homers in their best season, as well as their lifetime home run count. Many people, experts and laypersons alike, take the view that the Bible code is principally a verification that proves the existence of God, the divine inspiration of Scripture, and confirmation of Christ in messianic prophecies.
We're moving toward bringing in the world's greatest oil field, we believe, because our geologists say there's tremendous wealth at great depth. When I heard about the Bible code, I said, my goodness, surely something as great and significant prophetically as this is going to be in the history of Israel and the world, surely the Bible code can unlock the door and be so very exact in the depth, in the day probably that we're going to hit, and the month and the quantities.
I've been working with Ness Energy International in an effort to develop a Bible code matrix for their oil drilling project in Israel. I have solved that part of the puzzle, and the results of the matrix are quite startling. The oil will be found at the southwest corner of the Dead Sea. Ness Energy will strike oil, and it will be a gusher. The exact day is confirmed in the Bible code. Time and again we have seen the future unfold exactly as a biblical prophet stated long ago. With this historic perspective in mind, we have confidence that the apocalyptic events of the end time will happen. Since the Bible code is a part of the Bible, indeed the work of the same divine hand, shouldn't we studiously examine the code as it relates to prophecies in the future?
We have the first scientific evidence we have ever had that we're not alone. Because no human being put this code into the Bible. Some intelligence, very different than our own, one that could see across time, encoded the Bible 3,000 years ago with accurate information about today's world and perhaps tomorrow's. This changes everything.
The possibilities could be endless. The research continues, however, and new, exciting, and controversial information is an almost daily occurrence. But now, for the first time, those seeking answers to the age-old question of the Bible's authenticity can look to science as well as religion. According to the mathematicians and scientists, there is theoretically no limit to what could be learned from the information that might be encoded. There could be 10 or 20 billion combinations, more than anyone could ever count. And that is only at the first and crudest level of the Bible code, a level that is already being expanded. Was this hidden text sealed up in a sort of time lock that could only be opened with the invention of computers? More importantly, can this amazing discovery ultimately make the world a safer place? Or is it just a curiosity of numbers and language? You might want to think about that the next time you pick up your Bible.